Hello again. Who did you expect? It's me again. All right. Well, we're going to get started. You can see where I'm at here. It's on the beach, the palm trees, but it's raining, so better get going here. Let's go and share the screen with a PowerPoint presentation, as I normally do. And I don't know if these things have to be closed, but they do. So they are, and we will get started. And this is Chapter 7, Site Characterization and Hazards. What do I mean by site characterization? I mean sizing up the site. Because remember, emergency responder, when they get there, well, they have the faintest idea what's going on. So as affecting the health and safety of responders, there's a sign that says dangerous. Distinguish the many site hazards and risks, learn to identify the site hazards, understand how to remove or protect from the hazards. An incident or emergency response, there are numerous hazards in addition to the chemical risk too, not just the chemical risk. Well, there's certainly some of those. So responders must learn to identify the hazards quickly and determine how to protect from the risks. Some of the simplest risks can become major incidents on the hazmat scene. The key is early identification. Remember, responders are working in an uncontrolled environment. Of course, there's chemical exposure to be expected. Minimize direct contact, minimize exposure risks, of course, utilize control measures, know the chemical hazards, and use proper PE. Must all be accomplished. And again, this PowerPoint is just the high points. This chapter is a very long chapter, very interesting, a lot of good stuff in it. Read the chapter. All the tests are going to come out of the chapter book, not these PowerPoints. Fire explosion, that's very possible. There could be chemical reactions that could cause a fire and or an explosion. Ignition of explosives or flammables could be anywhere. Ignition due to oxygen enrichment can happen. Agitation of shock-sensitive materials can happen, or sudden release of pressure. Protect from fire and explosion by monitoring the atmosphere for flammable conditions. Keep ignition sources away. Use non-sparking equipment, and follow safe practices. Noise can come from a variety of sources and can cause workers to be startled, annoyed, distracted, physically hurt, short-term and long-term hearing loss. I know my dog barks sometimes and he startles me and annoys me and distracts me. Unfortunately, rather for me, he doesn't physically hurt me, but I don't think I have any long-term hearing loss. But anyhow, noise in areas where noise levels are above 90 decibels TWA, time-weighted average, is 8-hour time-weighted average. Hearing protection is required. Protection consists of earplugs, earmuffs, or a combination of those, and that's called PPE. We know that. There are biological hazards on a site: snakes, insects, animals, the black widow spider and a brown recluse spider. You don't want to be bit by either one of those. Plants, pathogens, there could be a lot of stuff. Ionizing radiation, alpha, beta, gamma, X-ray. You have all different kinds of radiation. Those give you kind of the idea of the size, and they'll kind of give you the idea of what will happen to radiation. The bigger ones, alphas, will be stopped by paper. The other ones are aluminum. The beta and the gamma will go through that, but they will be stopped by lead. So there are physical hazards on a site. That could be holes or ditches, unstable surfaces that might give way when you step on them. Sharp objects could be hidden underneath trash or debris or water. Uneven terrain, steep grades are possible. Slippery surfaces are possible. There's a lot of different things. Physical hazards could be on a site. Slips, trips, and falls are a big hazard. Holes, ditches, crevasses, sloping terrain, ice or water or chemicals on the ground. PPE can hinder your vision. Tools or equipment you have to carry, that makes it more difficult. It makes it difficult to keep your balance. Fall protection, use proper equipment if on elevated surfaces. And he says way cool or something like that. I don't know why. I don't know why that's there either. Anyhow, don't climb on machinery, boxes, crates, etc. If over 6 feet, use fall protection. I guess that's his fall protection there. Good thing it's water. It'd be in sad shape if it was concrete. Electrical hazards, overhead power lines. Overhead power lines are extremely dangerous. They were building a freeway in the middle of Los Angeles, and they had a lot of workers there. And there was 3 guys that were working there, and they were on lunch break. just having lunch, and they were just having lunch. It was nice out. They're leaned up against this chain link fence while they're eating lunch, and nearby a sky, what we call it, the big forklifts was up, and it hit the was up against the fence and hit the overhead power lines, and it killed all three of those guys. All they were doing was standing there eating lunch against the fence. Overhead power lines are not to be messed with. You want to stay 10 feet away from them all the time. Down the electrical lines can happen too. If the electrical line is down, you want to be very careful about that. There's things you can do too. For instance, you don't want you're both feet on the ground, because then you're getting electricity going to go from one foot to the other. So if you have to get away from a down electrical line, you want to hop on one foot. That way there's no path for the electricity to flow through you. Buried cables could be unearthed. Electric outlets and connections could be anywhere. This guy here's having a problem. Huh? Or maybe he's just waving. He's happy to see us. I don't know. Severe weather. Thunderstorms and severe weather can sometimes develop quickly. We know that living in Oklahoma. Huh? Tornadoes, floods, and lightning are all risks on a hazmat scene. A plan should be developed to ensure safety of responders during severe weather. Lightning, of course, is severe risk during outdoor operations, particularly for responders. Lightning can strike from as far as 20 to 30 miles away. Responders should be aware of approaching storms by all means. You know, outside, even if you're playing golf, you don't want to be in a lightning storm. Lockout, tagout. OSHA 29 CFR 1910.147, the control of hazardous energy, and includes authorized and affected employees and other employees too, but mainly these two. Authorized are the ones that are actually going to put their locks on and do the work on the equipment. Affected employees are people that are like operating the equipment and are affected by the lockout, but aren't actually working on it. Now, an affected employee can become an authorized employee if they are trained to do so, so that when the line we're working on does go down, they can help fix it, but they can't do that unless they're authorized. The control of all hazardous energy for each source is important. There's numerous sources for lockout, including electrical, hydraulic, pneumatic, water, thermal, stored energy, any kind of sources you have. Most of the time in a factory, anyhow, it's electrical, because that's what's going to run the machine. But it could be, there's a lot of pneumatic and hydraulic too. Equipment for lockout includes locks, weatherproof tags, because this is going to be outside, clamps, chains, braces, cord caps that go on a cord, gang locks for multiples. Could be a lot of different things. Numerous sources for lockout, again, include electrical, hydraulic, pneumatic, water, thermal, stored energy, and other. And you want to control all sources for each source. I think what happened, I'm going backwards. Lock requirements must be durable, keyable, must only have one key and issued to the worker only. Tag requirements must be durable and weatherproof. They must be in English. They must state caution or warning of the purpose of the tag and include the name or ID number of the worker, so that if the worker is not there, they know whose lock is on there. The main goal for proper lockout is zero energy state. Remember, if it can be locked out, it must be locked out. Primary risk of bloodborne pathogens include hepatitis A, hepatitis B, hepatitis C, HIV, and AIDS. You don't want to get any of these. Potentially infectious materials include blood, any kind of bodily fluids, items containing blood or bodily fluids, and then there's that all-encompassing OPIM, other potentially infectious materials. And the purpose of bloodborne pathogens regulation is to eliminate or minimize exposure risk. Again, exposure to OPIM, other potentially infectious materials. And that's why they call this universal precautions. In other words, just consider everything to be hazardous. So consider all blood and bodily fluid contaminated and infectious. Use proper PE and disposal methods. In other words, if it ain't yours, don't touch it. If it ain't your blood or whatever, don't touch it. So very important for the prevention of hepatitis A, B, C, and HIV and AIDS, and other things could be transmitted too. There's frequent confusion about confined spaces. And there are two types. There's a confined space, and then there's a permit required confined space. A confined space is a space that has all three of these conditions: limited means of entry or exit, large enough to bodily enter and work, and not designed for continuous human occupancy. So to be considered a confined space, it has to have all three of those. And the most obvious one usually is limited means of entry or exit. I mean, if it has a personnel door that you can open up, walk into, it's not a confined space. That's not a limited means of entry or exit. You don't have a lock on it, but it's not, I'd be able to be locked. That's not a limited means of entry or exit. It's like a hatch or something like that, a manhole or something like that. So for a space to be a confined space, it has to have all three of these. Now, a permit required confined space, also known as a permit space or PRCS, permit required confined space, is a confined space. So it has met all three of the ones we talked about before, plus any one of these. So three of the things has to have all of those be a confined space, but to be permit required, it only needs to be one of these. And that is contains or has the potential to contain a hazardous atmosphere. And that's probably the most common one. Potential for engulfment. Now, we're generally thinking about silos here. That's the most common, but there could be others. So potential for engulfment. Inwardly sloping walls or floors that could entrap or asphyxiate. So in other words, either slope, you can't get out, and you're going to fall to the bottom and maybe become trapped or asphyxiated. And then they catch all any other recognized serious hazard. So again, to be a confined space, it has to have all three of these: limited means of entry or exit, large enough to bodily enter and work. I mean, not get your hand in there, but you have to pack your entire body in it, and not designed for continuous human occupancy. And if it does have all three of these, it's a confined space. And if it has any one of these, it's a permit required confined space. One of these means contains or has the potential to contain a hazardous atmosphere, potential for engulfment, inwardly sloping walls that can entrap or asphyxiate, and any other recognized serious hazard. These are important distinctions to make because most people don't know them. They'll just call it confined space, and they won't realize that there's two different. There's a confined space and there's a permit required confined space. And as a safety professional, you really need to know that. Many response incidents and operations require responders to deal with confined space that contain a hazard, which are called permit required confined spaces. Examples of confined spaces include tanks, silos, sewers, manways, vaults, boilers, pipelines, trenches. Now, these all are probably confined spaces, but they're only permit required spaces if they meet one of those four. The most common one would be it has or has the potential to be a hazardous atmosphere. And one of the most common ones you see around is sewers. Sewers are confined space. So they have the potential to contain a hazardous atmosphere, and they help. Obviously, they meet the other three requirements of a confined space. All hazards of a confined space must be identified, required initial and continuous air monitoring for oxygen, lower explosive limit, and toxic vapor buildup. Entrants must be trained to recognize unknown hazards. Permit required confined spaces pose additional risks. There may be danger of engulfment, toxic atmosphere, high heat, visibility issues, high noise levels. Noise level could be bad because you're confined. The heat could be confined. And if you're using like oxygen or welding, something like that, that could suck up the oxygen in the space too. So anytime you're in a confined space, you have to be very careful. Permit required confined spaces require safety officer to issue permit allowing work. Well, the safety officer might do it, but it's the entry supervisor needs to sign it. An attendant must always be present, and a means of escape must be available. And you have to look up into, I'll have to put it in here. Specialized equipment may be necessary: harness, tripod hoist, air monitoring equipment, ventilation, extraction equipment. That's a harness, and there's your tripod hoist there. Well, that's not a tripod, but that's bolted down. And then that will hook up to the back middle on top of that harness. So if there's a problem, they can crank you up and get you out of there. There are a lot of procedures to be followed for a permit required confined space. So if you have those, you need to consult 29 CFR 1910.146 if you need to enter a permit required confined space. Don't take this lightly. People get killed in these very frequently. Heat stress is a major threat for individuals and responders. Responders are more susceptible to environmental conditions, and PPE plays a crucial role in heat stress. Factors affecting heat stress include ambient temperature, makes sense, humidity, and the heat index. Of course, ambient temperature plays a role once temperatures rise. Relative humidity can increase the risk and can vary with the time of day. Together, temperature and humidity make up the heat index, and there's your heat index chart. You can see there, just look at the 100 degrees there, and the relative humidity of 20%, your heat index is 99, not too bad. But when you get up there to a 70% relative humidity at 100 degrees, it's over 130 heat index. That's in the red zone. If it's in the red zone, you really want to be careful. Heat is a very serious issue. Once the heat index rises, responders become more susceptible due to PPE and work performed. Temperatures inside chemical protective ensembles can be extreme. In other words, you got your regular clothes on, now you're throwing on a protective suit. It's designed to keep out stuff. And all, guess what? It keeps in the heat too. Symptoms of heat stress include heat rash, heat cramps, heat exhaustion, and heat stroke. Heat rash occurs in hot, humid environments where sweat cannot easily evaporate. The treatment is drink plenty of fluids, keep affected area cool and dry, and it should go away within a few days, which is the heat rash. Now, heat cramps are the next step up, painful muscle spasms resulting from loss of salts and electrolytes due to sweating. Treatment, drink plenty of fluids, especially electrolytes. Rest in cool area, massage affected area, and they usually go away with help or not. Just stand away from them. Heat exhaustion occurs after exposure to high temperatures, dehydration, and imbalance of electrolytes. Typically, two types of heat exhaustion, water depletion and or salt depletion. Heat exhaustion symptoms include confusion, dark colored urine, dizziness, fainting and or fatigue, headache, profuse sweating, and rapid heartbeat. If you get any of those, heat exhaustion is very serious condition. Treatment for heat exhaustion includes rehydrate with non-caffeinated and non-alcoholic beverages, remove any tight or unnecessary clothing, take a cool shower, apply other active cooling measures such as fans or ice towels to back of neck, underarms, and groin area. A heat stroke, now that's the fourth stage of the heat illness, is a life-threatening condition. This is really serious. It occurs when the body fails to regulate its own body temperature. Body temperature can rise to 105 degrees Fahrenheit or more. And not only that, you can suffer brain damage from that much of a fever too. Symptoms include unconsciousness, convulsions, difficulty breathing, confusion, severe restlessness or anxiety, a very rapid heart rate, severe vomiting and or diarrhea, and sweating that may be heavy or sometimes, paradoxically, may have completely stopped. You can be hot, but your body can't even sweat anymore. When that's bad, you're having a heat stroke, you need to be calling 911 because, well, somebody does, because that is very, very serious condition. Heat stroke is a medical emergency. Treatment includes move to a cool place out of direct sunlight, remove unnecessary clothing, cool entire body by sponging or spraying cool water, place ice packs in groin area, armpits, and back of neck, but do not immerse in ice water. Factors making you more susceptible to heat stress include acclimation. In other words, you're not used to it. You just get thrown into it. The environment, of course, the clothing you have on, including the PPE you're probably wearing. Hydration, how are you being hydrated? Are you drinking enough fluids? Individuality, age, weight, fitness, etc. Very big a factor too. Medications you might be taking could be a factor. So preventing heat stress, again, acclimation, you need to get yourself used to it slowly. Maintain bodily fluids, drink lots of water or Gatorade, proper diet. Kind of late for that if you're there. Dress lightly, rest periods, and training and what to look for. But heat, don't underplay the seriousness of heat stress. And there's some heat categories. There's their index degrees Fahrenheit. So you're looking at, say, in the middle there, it's 85 to 87 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay, kind of a warm day, but not too hot. Easy work, not a big deal. Water intake, 3/4 of a quart. Now, if you moderate work, 40 minutes of work, 20 minutes of rest. And if it's hard work, 30 minutes and 30 minutes. Now, that's even though at 85, 87 degrees. So 30 minutes of work, 30 minutes of rest, and drinking a quart of water. That's a lot of water, but that's gives you an idea what you need to do here. And this is a good idea to have something like this around, a good guide to have. Caution, heat stress monitoring should be conducted at temperatures above 70 degrees to help in reducing the potential for heat-related illnesses. This is a number that's pretty well accepted. If it's over 70, that's not real hot out, but again, if somebody's wearing full full protective suit and other PPE, it's going to seem a lot hotter. Cold stress is just as critical to the responder as heat stress. Some conditions can be just as severe. 2 cold stress symptoms of concern include hypothermia and frostbite. You don't want to mess around with either one of those. So signs and symptoms of mild hypothermia are shaking, lack of coordination, slurred speech, memory loss, pale cold skin, moderate shivering stops, unable to walk or stand, confused and or irrational, unable to walk or stand. That's pretty serious. Severe, mild muscle stiffness, very sleepy or unconscious, cold skin, and death. So it's not nothing to mess around with. Treatment for mild hypothermia, move to a warm area. Duh. Stay active, remove wet or damp clothes, and drink a warm but not hot drink. For moderate hypothermia, do the same thing for the mild, but then you want to cover all extremities completely. Place warm objects over patient's head, neck, chest, and groin. And severe hypothermia, ALS, advanced life support needed. Treat patient very gently. Do not attempt to rewarm them. So if you get severe hypothermia, you need to have medical care. Don't ever feel afraid to call 911 for heat stress or hypothermia. If you think if somebody's even advanced, if they're getting confused, stuff like that, that's a pretty good sign that there's something wrong there. So it's best to be safe and not sorry. Frostbite refers to the freezing of body tissue. The bodily parts located further away from the body are the most at risk: fingers, toes, ears, and nose. And chicken plants maintenance guys working inside a freezer, a spiral freezer, they would get in there and they would want to get the job done and not quit. And they would sometimes get frostbite on their fingers. Frostbite is a medical emergency. Treatment depends on severity of injury. Do not rub affected tissue. This can increase damage to the tissue. If the affected area may be frozen before seeking help, don't try to warm it. Factors contributing to cold stress are cold temperatures, okay, high cold winds, of course, dampness, and cold water. Cold stress illness have been reported at temperatures above 50 degrees Fahrenheit. Temperature and wind combined can increase the effect. This is called the wind chill factor. And this is one here. This is a little harder to read. So you got this kind of runs backwards. The temperatures on the top actually go start at 40 degrees and go to minus 40. And as you can see, the darker blue is more serious. Unknown caller. Sorry about that. By the way, I already knew that my car insurance had expired. Anyhow, parent temperature then is at the bottom. So you can see there, I'm going to put my glasses on, look at this thing, it's hard to read. There we go. These aren't very clear numbers. At 0 degrees, let's just say, and wind speed of 10 miles an hour, it's going to feel like minus 16, but wind speed of 40 miles an hour, like minus 29. And then the lighter, the darker, the blue you get, the less frostbite times kick in. So you got 30 minutes, 10 minutes, and 5 minutes. So you get minus 20 degrees outside and a 40 mile an hour wind. In 5 minutes, you're going to have frostbite. That's not very long. To prevent cold-related illness, drink plenty of fluids, protect your face, dress warmly and in layers, keep dry, divert the wind if you can, adhere to proper work rest schedules, always use the buddy system and keep active. With all the hazards present at an incident site, safety is of the utmost importance. A safety and health plan is required to ensure the hazards are identified. It helps to minimize the risks, typically developed by the site safety officer. The safety and health plan is developed prior to work on an incident, and it's continually updated as work progresses. New hazards are going to come up, hazards are going to be eliminated, work changes, any other conditions change. So that's that. So read the chapter. It's a pretty long chapter, but there's a lot of good stuff in it, like there is in any of these chapters. And then don't just rely on this. We're just covering the tip of the iceberg in this. That's it for this one. I got to get inside before I get too wet. Bye.